This series of talks has been entitled The Stations of the Heart. And before I started, Llewellyn said, well, you can talk and talk endlessly because the stations of the heart have no end. But of all the stations of the heart, the Dhikr, which means literally remembrance, is the most paradoxical one. Because more than any other station, the Dhikr defies words and description. Now we usually say that, but there's a particular reason why this is from the essence paradoxical. Because Dhikr really means remembrance. That's what the word means. But the real experience which the practice of Dhikr points towards is an experience of total forgetfulness, of forgetting everything, aught good. Now, how is this possible? And what does it mean? We call it remembrance, and in fact it's an experience of forgetfulness. It means simply that through one's total attachment to, or rather through one's total absorption in the invocation of God's name or names, this invocation which sometimes we call mantra, in this absorption, in this total absorption, everything ultimately disappears from the orbit of perception or the orbits of imagination or comprehension. And what is left is a state in which one is absorbed in nothingness. And this is a real experience. Now let us see. Our hearts go through many states and stages. They are tossed and turned endlessly from one pole of emotions, from one pole of sensations, or states of mind, or life crises, to the opposite pole. And our hearts are ever restless until they find their rest in you. We fall and we rise and we try again, only in order to fall and rise and try again, and so on and so on, a never-ending story. And on this long journey of our hearts to their real home, there is not much peace, there is not much rest. And yet what our hearts really yearn for is this total peace of merging with that. Why? Because our hearts carry the heavy burden of our individual, separate existence. Now there is a substance in our hearts which does not really belong to the world of multitude forms and appearances. And yet this substance has to reside within our systems, our physical systems, our emotional systems, mental systems. It doesn't want to, it cannot, it doesn't know how, because it doesn't belong to this world of multitude appearances, and yet it has to. And all these multitude appearances are all about distinctions and separations, and this is only for oneness. In our meetings, we talk sometimes about individuation. This is a psychological term, and we are quite interested in psychological systems because sometimes we find them helpful. Now, individuation means to stand alone as a separate human being in the world. And the process of individuation is the process whereby we are working towards separating ourselves from the constant unconscious need to merge and identify with our fellow men and women. Especially those men and women like our fathers and mothers and teachers who had left an important impression on our lives, both favorably and unfavorably. Now, individuation is the process whereby we strive to find our own true self, so to speak. And so much of our short existence is taken up by introjecting others into our own psychological mechanism, or by projecting our psychological components into others. So we don't really live our true selves. When we proceed on the path of individuation, we may become shocked to realize to what a great extent our people's lives is our life, formed and shaped by the constant and nearly always unconscious need to merge with others. Our surrender is more often than not to the beloved, but to those others. And our seemingly waking existence is not wakeful at all. Our seemingly willful decisions and choices are never really based on what we know with any amount of certitude to be what we really, sincerely wish for ourselves. We react negatively or positively, defensively or defiantly, arrogantly or humbly, generously or greedily, but we react to stimuli which press on our unconscious buttons. And so much of our seemingly wakeful consciousness is trapped within this Ouroboros vicious circle. So individuation is the process whereby we strive to make this Ouroboros existence less Ouroboros. We try to stand alone on our 2 feet. And this is pretty difficult. We have to resist this part in us which wants just that, to psychologically merge with the other, but not with God. But the mystical path starts really where individuation ends. Mrs. Tweedy had a long talk which was published eventually, her first talk in the Transpersonal Association in Davos, in which she said this sentence which I'm quoting now. The mystical path starts where individuation ends. When we wake up from our dreamy existence and we realize, as Prospero did, that these our actors were all spirits and are melted into air, into thin air. And like the baseless fabric of this vision, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself, yea, all which it inherits shall dissolve. And like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a trace behind. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep. No, this is not Rumi, it's not Attar, this is Shakespeare. Now when we wake up from this dreamy existence of ours, we realize that even the state of individuation, even the search for our psychological true selves, although indispensable, have been nothing but a dream, a figment of imagination, like chasing rainbows the trick of the great bewitcher, Maya. We can only realize this when our inner eyes have been opened. What the dhikr is really about, and what my talk will try to say, is that it's all about living in another dimension, allowing that there are other dimensions. Now, when these eyes or ears, which belong to the innermost hidden part within us, this entity which resides in our niche of light, in the inner recesses of our hearts, when these eyes or ears open, things change. We see that what we took for reality is nothing but a dream. These are subtle organs of perception which are attached to that otherworldly substance which resides in our depths. Sufis sometimes call this substance secret, sir in Arabic. And this part in us cannot be occupied, will not be occupied with questions about true or false self, about whether I live or do not live my femininity, my masculinity, etc. On the contrary, this part in us, when awakened, feels trapped by our psychological needs and explorations, by the narcissistic self-centeredness of our egos. Human beings, once awakened, are to live in the most difficult mode of existence, because they truly, and with open eyes, belong now to two diametrically opposed realms: the realm of the self with small s, and the realm of the non-self. It is not possible for us to dispose of any one of these two altogether. And our psyche is the arena where the two realms meet. With our heads, we carry the vault of the skies, while our 2 feet stand firm on the ground. Another quotation that Tweedy used to repeat. And this in itself is yet another example of the meeting of the 2 seas that I spoke about in our last talk. We were destined to live in the 2 realms at one and the same time. And eventually we were destined to become free of the pull of polarity. Now, in the practice of dhikr, we have been given a tool whereby we may gradually move from the process of psychological individuation into the process of the true merging of the heart with that which doesn't have a name. This doesn't mean that the processes of our psychological and social individuation must come to an end before practicing the dhikr. This is not possible. It only means that in time we learn to make room, to prepare a space within ourselves for another type of process. A process which belongs to another dimension. The dimension of the innermost recesses of the heart, in which total silence, a total quietening down of all perceptions reigns. It also means that through the process of committing ourselves to dhikr, we gradually become more aware, more sensible, more intuitive, and more insightful to the real existence of this other dimension within us. Only through this awareness may we ultimately understand that this polarity between self and non-self, and I'm using here self in the sense of ego, self with a small s. So we may ultimately understand that this polarity between self and non-self has nothing to do with duality. Sometimes we ask, so, but if there is oneness, what does it matter? It's not duality. But it has nothing to do with duality, but it has everything to do with the fact that we exist in many more levels of existence than our ordinary mind can admit to. It's not a question of one and the other. It's a question of being here and being somewhere else at one and the same time, and it's all within us. This is the teaching, that it's not about flying away somewhere or waiting until we die, but here, in the moment, in the flesh. Now, the minds of our predecessors were much more in tune with the concept of many-layered reality than ours. I think today, even people who have meditated for years find it quite difficult to not to absorb mentally, but to live out the reality that there are so many dimensions. But our ancestors lived it almost naturally. And images, especially if they were mystics, and images and visions of the ascent of the soul through the 7 heavenly temples or its descent into the depths of the underworld are only a couple of examples of the vividness and directness with which ancient and medieval mystics experienced the manifold level of existence. I died as mineral and became a plant, says Rumi. I died as plant and rose to animal. I died as animal and I was a man. Why should I fear? When was I less by dying? Yet once more I shall die as man, to soar with angels blessed. But even from angelhood I must pass on. All except God perish. When I have sacrificed my angel soul, I shall become what no mind ever conceived. Oh, let me not exist, for non-existence proclaims in organ tones, to him we shall return. Rumi. Now, Dhikr is the 5th, or according to some traditions, the first out of 8 principles which were developed by the Naqshbandi masters and which have distinguished the Naqshbandi path from most other Sufi paths. This is not to say that the practice of Dhikr was invented by the Naqshbandis. The practice of Dhikr has been there for many, many centuries, and in a way even before Sufism, even before Islam. The repetition of God's name in many traditions, in many places. But the Naqshbandis place the Dhikr in a very particular way, and they put a very particular emphasis on it. So they have developed 8 and later on 11 principles, and the Dhikr is one of them. In some lists it is the 5th, in some lists it is the 1st. This principle, when observed and practiced, so the Naqshbandi writers tell us, can produce, and now I quote a little sentence, can produce an inward awareness of God, exalted be He. The origin of these 8 principles, which I'm not going to list all of them, but the origin of the 8 principles within the Naqshbandi tradition, and in particular the teaching of the Naqshbandi Dhikr, are linked with the name of Abdul Khalik al-Ghujdawani. He was a disciple of a 12th century Sufi master, highly revered Sufi master by the name of Yusuf al-Hamazani. From this master, really, the lineage of the Naqshbandis in its original name originated. And the original name of the Naqshbandis were the Path of the Masters, the Khojagan. So we have here the earliest master of the Path of the Masters, Yusuf al-Hamadani, and his disciple Abdul Khalik al-Ghujdawani. We're talking about the 12th century. Now al-Ghujdawani was the master who taught his disciples the silent dhikr, what we call the silent meditation of the heart, the dhikr of the heart, dhikr khafi. And this teaching he transmitted directly through the power of his spirituality to Baha'u'ddin Naqshband, although the latter lived about 150 years later, because al-Ghujdawani died in 1220 and Baha'u'ddin died in 1389, so you see that at least 150 years between them. And although they had between them 5 generations of teachers in the lineage of this path. So that means that through the term is through the spirituality, namely not necessarily in the flesh, through a meeting which is not necessarily in the flesh or in the lifetime of the teachers, there are meetings. And we say it's quite substantial in our tradition that we meet in the night. Abdul Khalik himself, now that is important, was taught the silent dhikr by Dhikr, this mysterious teacher who waits, and I quote, where the 2 seas meet. As we have seen in our last meeting, when a change of direction is about to take place, or when a tremendous breakthrough is about to occur, Dhikr is there at the meeting point of old and new, of heaven and earth. It's a phenomenal image, this symbol or image or myth or personality of Dhikr, because always it is where the opposites meet, where new and old meet, when death and life meet. He's there, he's working. This applies in particular to situations in which the change is not just a matter of natural course, because always changes occur. But sometimes it is not a matter of natural course, but it is it is not simply by way of a mechanical evolution, but rather when a leap into another level of events or another dimension of existence is called for. This tradition is linked with Dhikr. At these turning points in our individual lives, as well as in the lives of groups and traditions, Dhikr is at work. And this is how the inner and the outer paths evolve. So Abdul Khalik al-Ghujdawani, who taught the silent zikr, was himself taught this by Dhikr. And in this way it happened 8 centuries ago in Bukhara in the further reaches of the Central Asian Muslim territories, that Abd al-Khaliq hit upon a Quranic verse. I quote the verse: "Call upon you, Lord, humbly and secretly. Ud'u rabbakum tadarruan wa khufyatan." Perceiving that a deep hint lurks behind these words, he was nevertheless at a loss to grasp the meaning of the verse, until Khidr appeared to him and made him call the name of God under water. In this way, the silent dhikr was born. And ever since this has been the ultimate hallmark of the Naqshbandiya. If you want truth, as a drowning man wants air, you shall get it in a split second. This statement, which has been reiterated time and time again by our direct teachers on this path, reverberates in our ears. Being submerged in water, Rujdavani must have had at least a glimpse of the experience of a drowning man. Yet at that moment, he was totally immersed in the remembrance of God, in total surrender, not minding death, and thus gave birth to what is perhaps the most profound practice of the Naqshbandi path, the silent meditation of the heart of hearts, when nothing else exists. For all of us who have been keeping up with this tradition, this is still a most powerful practice of tremendous transformative potential, to let everything drown and be submerged within the remembrance of God, precisely as we have been taught by Tweedy. I quote now: "We must suppose that we go deep within ourselves, deeper and deeper into our most hidden self. There, in our innermost being, in the very core of ourselves, we will find a place where there is peace, stillness, and love. After having found this place, we must imagine that we are seated there, immersed into, surrounded by the love of God. We are in deepest peace. All of us is there, physical body and all. Nothing is outside, not even a fingertip, not even the tiniest hair. Nothing will remain." It's from the Daughter of Fire, of course. Now, in an old Naqshbandi source book, which I happen to have, it's a book that I bought years ago in Old Jerusalem. So in this old Naqshbandi source book, the following explanation is given as to the esoteric association of the silent dhikr and the name of this fraternity known as the Naqshbandiya. I quote now, it's quite a long passage and not at all easy. "The meaning of Naqshband is to seal the imprint. Naqsh means to engrave, to make an impression, to make an imprint. Band means to tie, to bind, to seal. Esoterically, it means to seal the imprint of the form of perfection upon the seeker's heart. Sometimes this form of perfection is symbolized by the letter Aleph. And we used to say about Guruji that he could inscribe the Aleph on the back of the heart. So that means the same thing. So esoterically, this Naqshband means to seal the imprint of the form of perfection upon the seeker's heart. Up to the time of the master Bahauddin, who was nicknamed Naqshband, the followers of the path of the masters used to practice the dhikr silently in solitude, but audibly in groups. But the master ordered that they should practice it at all times in silence. And this he did because of an order he had received from the spirituality of the master Abdul Khalik al-Ghujdavani, who was the deceased master of his masters in the world of the journey to God, like meeting in the night. The latter and his associates, namely Abdul Khalik Ghujdavani and his associates, used to practice the dhikr silently, whether alone or within a group. And practiced in this way, their dhikr produced a tremendous impression on the hearts of the disciples. And this impact was called Naqsh. The Naqsh is the form or the blueprint of that which is imprinted upon wax or any similar material. And the band, namely the binding, is the subsistence of the imprint permanently without effacement. Just like to remind you that I'm still quoting from this Arabic source. It is told that when Adam and his progeny were created, God's forms were looked upon or observed by the tawajjuh of the supernal divine essence, without how and without when. Now I have to explain. The tawajjuh is one of the most esoteric practices which exist in this fraternity. And this is really the way in which the teaching is passed on from master, from teacher to disciple. The word itself means facing each other, looking each other in the eye to eye. And the teaching is passed not through words, but through this tawajjuh. And it's never done in a ceremony. You never know really, formally, when it is done. So here we have a tradition that when Adam and his progeny were created, in the act of creation, God's forms were looked upon by the tawajjuh of the supernal divine essence. It is as if when we talk about God, when we mention God's name, we are aware that God has forms, that God has names, that God has attributes. But beyond these names and attributes, there is the essence. And this tradition says that in the act of creation, the forms which created, because the essence doesn't create, it is the forms which create, they were looked upon by the essence of God himself, without how and without when. And thus, Adam and his progeny came into being with a special form which is named by the names of the divine observer and which is predicated by his attributes. And it is in the essence of this form that human beings' relationship with God is realized. As He has actions, so they have actions. As He has laws, so they have laws imposed on others. And it is in this way that the imprint, the naqsh of the essence, the attributes, the names, the actions, and the laws were manifested in the coming into being of Adam and his progeny. So this is quite tremendous. It means really that everything that we invoke, the names that we invoke, the attributes that we are conscious of or unconscious of, are also in us. However, some of the descendants of Adam have effaced this imprint, have allowed this imprint to efface, to rub off, due to the predominance within them of the lower selves over the perfected human self. It's quite extraordinary how in this text it is not the perfected divine self or the perfected angelic self, but the text says very clearly the perfected human self. Some have allowed it to efface, but some have perfected the imprint, the naqsh, and they are called Naqshbandis. We can see then how intrinsic the practice and meaning of Dhikr are for the Naqshbandi tradition. I'll just repeat one sentence that I have read before. Practiced in silence, the Dhikr produced a tremendous impact in the hearts of the disciples. And it is through this practice that what had been imprinted on the soft, receptive, raw material of the heart becomes perfected through the Dhikr. The Arabic text from which I have quoted tells us, in fact, that in the heart of every human being there are counterparts, not only to God's attributes, actions, and laws, but also to God's essence, without how and without when. And these counterparts or forms which have been imprinted on the heart from the very beginning of humanity, from its very inception, have their blueprints in God's forms. What a bold idea. I don't know that there are many other mystical systems which have this idea. Now these imprints during our lifetime can be either effaced or perfected and sealed forever. When the disciple practices the silent dhikr, in which the sacred name Allah reverberates in his innermost, and especially when he practices this dhikr in the presence of the masters of this path, whether in flesh or in spirit, then something of a tremendous magnitude takes place. A direct relationship, which is called nisba, as a kind of technical term. A direct relationship is then created, not only between the disciple and the master, but also between the divine essence and the human essence, which are one and the same. But they have to be linked somehow, and it couldn't be done without the dhikr. This is the meaning and also the fulfillment of being created in the image of God. And this is why the Sufi teachers have said that there is nothing really of value in this life except the remembrance of God. In the same vein, they have also said that every minute that passes without remembering God is a wasted minute. So according to the esoteric teaching, one is taught to be constantly in the state of remembering God. Now when we think of it from our habitual mind, this of course seems impossible. There's so many things that we need to do in this life. How can it be that we do nothing else but remember the name of God? How can we remember to remember God constantly? And in order to practice the dhikr continuously, we sometimes do all sorts of things, like we hang little bits of paper in our kitchens and bedrooms and studies. Someone put under the cushion, or we make notes in our handkerchiefs, or we set the alarm clocks to wake us up at specific times in order to practice the mantra. And so indeed we do our best. I'm not saying this in any facetious way. We really make an effort to remember. But through making this effort and through eventually remembering to remember, there may come a time when it is almost the other way around. There may come a time when the level of our waking consciousness will become very low, very hazy. We will not be able to focus very well or to see very clearly. And a kind of heaviness will spread through our bodies. The mental processes may become slow because somewhere we do remember, and somewhere we are submerged without any effort and without any merit. If we make an effort, we want to be merited. This is not the ordinary way in which we recollect things. See, in order to remember something that happens in life or an information that I have that I need to tell you, I have to make a conscious effort to remember something that it is out there. But this is not the ordinary way in which we recollect things. In this state, it may happen that the mantra will indeed surface up by itself, with a heartbeat, or with the waves of the breath, Al on the out-breath, La on the in-breath, and so it will go on forever. Al, La, ad infinitum. And it may happen that in these states of effortless, mindless remembrance, we shall feel totally enveloped, totally secure and fulfilled. But we do not register this at all, because this silent dhikr simply takes us away from our conscious selves into the realms of love in oneness. Someone I know told me about a simple experience. They were in a hospital and needed to do some tests, and the tests had to be done in anesthetics, full anesthetics, and they were waiting in bed for the nurse to come and inject them this material. And while they were waiting, they were doing the mantra. And then the nurse came and gave them the injection, and the next thing they knew was that they were still doing the mantra, except that it wasn't in the bed that they had been before, but in another space. And it turned out that they had gone into this unconsciousness of the anesthetics, and the test had been done, and then when they have emerged again, the mantra was being repeated. So that's obviously a sign that the process continued to go on unconsciously. Now, in the 9th and 10th century, there lived in Nishapur, one of the central cities of medieval Iran, a group of mystics who became known as the Malamatiya, which translates as the followers of the path of blame. In more ways than one, these people and their teaching have become connected with the later Naqshbandiya. Two of the principles were adopted and perfected by the Naqshbandi teachers. First, the principle of solitude in the crowd, or solitude in the marketplace. And second, the principle of the silent dhikr. Now these people, the Malamatis, those who seemingly incurred blame upon themselves, they were really after the perfection or purification of the mystical life. And through their inner investigations, they came to understand, as all Sufis in fact did, that the greatest hindrance to the perfection of the mystical life is the self, again with a small s. They came to realize that the self is there in whatever we do and in whatever we aspire for. They taught that the self is there, very much alive and prospering, not only in situations which are commonly accepted as contrary to spiritual life, as, for example, when we are lustful or greedy for material gains, or arrogant or selfish. Now, everybody knows that that's very bad, that this is the ego playing a role, and we have to work against it. But what they said that, yes, this is obvious, but the little self is there even in spiritual experiences. They taught that if one observes oneself carefully and sincerely, with no delusions, one will find that the self is lurking also behind the loftiest of spiritual practices and experiences. In other words, they taught that strictly speaking, there is no way in which the self can be willfully conquered and neutralized. Now, one of the arenas in which the self thrives most, they taught, is the public arena. Some were even highly spiritual or ascetic travelers on the path may send hidden glances, so very well hidden in fact that they themselves will not necessarily notice them, but they will send hidden glances to view the impact that their way of life makes upon the public. And the Malamatis taught that secretly we always, in one way or another, consider our fellow man's opinion of us. We cannot get rid of, it is important for me to know what you think of me. It is important for me to please you in some way or to defy you in some way. So all this consideration is going on all the time, so they said, even when it comes to very lofty way of life. And they also said that unconsciously we are directed to do what we do, not only because of the predominance of God's will within our consciousness, but also because we consider others. And in their pursuit of eliminating as far as possible this social or psychological consideration or identification with others, the Malamatis rejected all external signs of spirituality. Unlike other Sufi groups, the Malamatis did not distinguish themselves by special costumes or colors. They did not indulge in extroverted ascetical behavior, and they refrained from practicing the dhikr audibly, contrary to the custom in most other Sufi fraternities, in which dhikr had been conventionally practiced with music and movements. The Malamatis, in their pursuit for purity, also warn their disciples against the danger of self-delusion in the arena of spiritual practices and experiences. They taught that the conscious mind had somehow to become utterly silenced, utterly introverted, totally submerged in black, formless, senseless nothingness. The implication of their teaching was that in the performance of dhikr, the awareness of performing the dhikr should be totally annihilated. The true dhikr then would be that dhikr which is hidden from the awareness of one's fellow men as well as from the awareness of one's own mind. The introversion which they advocated was therefore twofold. The introversion from the public eye and the introversion from the inner eye. All had to be silenced. Most difficult. Now, the sayings and principles of the Malamati teachers of Nishapur have been lovingly recorded by one of the later Nishapuri teachers, Abu Abdurrahman al-Sulami, from the 11th century. In a short treatise entitled The Malamatiya Epistle, he had quoted many sayings attributed to the Malamati teachers. Now, the following passage that I would like to read to you is a translation of one of the most condensed and most challenging statements which the Malamatis had left behind about dhikr. This one is not long, but it's not easy. I'm quoting. One of their principles is that there are 4 grades of the remembrance of God. The dhikr of the tongue, the dhikr of the heart, the dhikr of the innermost, and the dhikr of the spirit. When the dhikr of the spirit is sound, is good, the heart and the innermost are silenced. This is the dhikr of testifying or contemplation. When the dhikr of the innermost is good, the heart and the spirit are silenced. And this is the dhikr of awe. When the dhikr of the heart is good, the tongue is silenced. And this is the dhikr of divine grace. And when the heart is heedless of the dhikr, then the tongue takes over. And this is the dhikr of habit. Each one of these grades has a blemish. The blemish of the dhikr of the spirit is that it be perceived by the innermost. The blemish of the dhikr of the heart is that the lower self should take notice of it and admire it, or that it should gain by it the reward of attaining one of the spiritual ranks. This is most challenging to the mind. If I were to sum up this highly crystallized teaching, I would say this. In the practice and experience of the silent dhikr, we start by pronouncing the mantra, the sacred name Allah. We do not practice it audibly, to be sure, but we still start by some kind of awareness and attachment to the external form of the name, its sounds and reverberations as we imagine them in our minds. Now this is the dhikr of the tongue, whether we pronounce it or not. And it is the more or less habitual or mechanical aspect of dhikr. Now then comes a stage in which the heart takes over. We may not be aware of sounds and forms anymore, but rather experience a state of bliss. This is a deeper state of dhikr, and the bliss emanates from divine grace. Even more profound and beyond the limits of our ordinary consciousness is the stage when the remembrance of God takes place, as it were, in our secrets, in our innermost, in our heart of hearts. The experience which emanates from this stage, according to the Malamati teaching, is one of awe. What it means, possibly, is that in these depths one becomes aware, somewhere and somehow, of the divine tremendum. And people have sometimes experiences, even dreams, which shake them. God is not only nice and kind and merciful and benevolent, it's also tremendous. Then comes a stage in which one has gone beyond one's humaneness into the realm of the spirit. According to the Quran, the spirit belongs entirely to God and to God alone. Its relationship with God is the most profound mystery which had not been revealed even to the prophets and even to the angels. Now this last bit of dhikr, last stage of dhikr, according to the Malamatis, is the dhikr of the spirit. And about this we are told that this is the dhikr of witnessing. The one who remembers becomes the witness of God in his kingdom. It is possible that by using the Arabic word testifying or witnessing, mushahada, the Malamati teachers hint that it is at this stage, the deepest stage of dhikr, that the reenactment of the primordial covenant between God and humanity takes place. All Sufis accept, it's a common knowledge, that the practice of dhikr is in fact a reenactment of this mythical, timeless covenant when God revealed himself to the not yet created souls and said to them, "Am I not your Lord?" And the souls answered, "Yes, we testify." So it is possible that in this deepest stage of dhikr, which is the dhikr of the ruh, of the spirit, this enactment of testifying occurs. We are also told in the above quoted passage that all these stages have blemishes. In other words, it is almost impossible to achieve them in perfection. They're never airtight. A total silencing down of all our outer and inner perceptions is indeed very difficult to achieve, if at all possible. But this is not the most important thing. What is important is the awareness that grows on us, that there exist within us layers upon layers upon layers upon layers of inner organs of perception, and that through the practice of dhikr these organs come to life and in time become finer and finer until knowledge and being become one and the same with no separation. Now I have tried to show some light points on the historical map of the Naqshbandi tradition, linking them with the Malamatis of the 9th century, also emphasizing that the links are many times in the spirit and not in the flesh. So it's not time-bound at all. And there's another historical link that I would like to make, and in this, to end this talk. So I wish to end this talk with a passage from another early mystic whose name is deeply linked with both the Naqshbandi masters, especially with Bahauddin, as well as with the Malamatis of Nishapur. Al-Hakim al-Tirmidhi knew and corresponded with several of the early Malamatis, although he did not belong to the groups. He did not belong to any group. He has been linked also with Bahauddin in his spirituality, namely again, not in the flesh, because Bahauddin lived more than 400 years after at-Tirmidhi. Similarly to the Malamatis and the Naqshbandis, at-Tirmidhi too was after an experience of dhikr, which is clean of the interference of the little self. And he too taught that the true mystic dhikr is the silent dhikr of the heart. Now here's how Al-Hakim al-Tirmidhi describes the stages of dhikr. I quote, "Remembrance is food for mystic knowledge. Mystic knowledge is sweet and pure, and the heart is its vessel and its treasure trove. In its essence, remembrance, or dhikr, emanates from the realm of divine joy, and therefore, when it descends upon the heart, it awakens joy and bliss. But for its mingling with the joy of the self, the little self, remembrance would be complete and pure. But when the self mingles with it, the divine support which flows from he who is remembered is cut off, and remembrance becomes stuck within the turbid, murky joy of the self. Those who aspire purity find pleasure in remembrance alone, in the dhikr alone, since their selves have become imprisoned by the hearts. The self is besieged, as it were, by the mystic knowledge, and thus it has become unfree to move about in the pursuit of its own pleasure. Outwardly, the mingling of the self with the dhikr may appear in the form of bodily movement. The one who performs the dhikr may dance, or clap his hands, or shake his head, or wave vigorously from side to side. We would say, be ecstatic. But all these involuntary bodily movements point to the fact that the turbulent little self has mixed its joy with the remembrance of the heart. So ecstasy is never a pure state of dhikr. Inwardly, the mingling of the self may appear as the heart's contemplation of remembrance itself. This too points to an impure remembrance in which the self is mingled, since remembrance is not the same as the remembered. When the dhikr is performed by one who has a seat and a communication on high, in the higher realms, then the heart will cease contemplating remembrance, and the heart's eyes will contemplate the remembered alone. And when the heart is engrossed in the remembered, it has no space and no room for contemplating remembrance. These are those of the pure dhikr, when there is no notion of dhikr. The hearts, Tirmidhi says, differ in rank and stage. The hearts of the ordinary worshippers are imprisoned in mid-air. They cannot soar very high because their earthly desires pull them down. The hearts of the seekers soar and then stop according to their ranks. Wherever they stop, that's where their rank is. They too are blocked by their earthly inclinations and are made heavy with the weight of their desires. The hearts of those who arrive stop by the throne with capital T. But they too are blocked by the remains of their desires, and they too cannot attain God's place in His kingdom. But the hearts of the pure and chosen ones reach Him where He sits, and theirs is the complete communication and the pure dhikr. They are those on whom Moses, peace be on him, spoke. "Oh God," he said, "are you near so I could talk with you? Or are you far so I should call to you?" God said, "I sit with those who remember me." So let's just go into the silence for a few minutes.
Those 4 stages, and I said, I'll go listen to this, and that was it.
I knew something was happening. I could sense. Well, you said this and I heard it. I wanted actually to stop and say something to you, but it wasn't right. I know what you mean. Yeah. Well, I wondered whether to read this, and then I said, why not? It's there. I didn't invent it. I just translated it. Why not? You know, these people were not better than us. I mean, they were, but they weren't. You know, like Tweedy has always said, when she was in utter despair and utter desolation, she used to say to herself, people have done this before me. People will do it after me. I'm not worse than anybody else. And this is a little bit like that, you know. It's a piece of history, but at the same time it's a living history because we are part of it. We are definitely part of it, and in this sense, it's not that they were these people in the 9th or 10th century. They had the highest aspirations, but being under the inspiration of Tweedy and Guruji, Baysab, I should say for the sake of the tape, it's also about the highest aspirations. So in that respect, it's all the same. And it's really not bullshit. It's so.
The power of the mantra, it was shown to me once in an experience, I don't know if I told it, but on a sudden the mantra did repeat itself, and it started to be greater and more cosmic and more cosmic and more cosmic. And it was so powerful and awful. I was frightened. It happened by itself. It went on. It started to be cosmic, more and more powerful. I was enormously frightened. It was so awesome.
Well, so you have, in a way, confirmation that in these stages it is the dhikr of awe. Because what is...
Very shortly after Mrs. Tweedy gave us the Aya mantra, I found myself in a dream doing it with great breaths in and out, again and again.
So,
I remembered.
This is...
And I wasn't doing it in waking life.
No. But things are happening in the night. You know, I mean, this is how, at least I make sense. I don't know if it's true or not, but of this aspect of this path, which is that we are taught sometimes through the spirituality of the teachers, and this is like a term which means not necessarily in the flesh. So the teachers are there, and we meet in the night in that sense with the teachers too. I mean, that's a reality. It's not like we sometimes think, we say it sort of in a manner of speech, metaphorically speaking or symbolically speaking. No, this is a reality, and it's like when we are here together, the quality of the attention of the heart calls the energy of the masters, and I mean, I can't prove it, but I don't have any doubt about it, and I think all of us at one time or another sense this. It's like, so the invocation sometimes can be also the name of a teacher. It could also be a mantra. When it just surfaces, it happens.
So I had a lift up from Canterbury. I came to the ceiling from Canterbury, and in the car I was just telling her, a friend was asking what was the talk that I was coming to the ceiling, so I was just telling her about it. And then we just looked at the car in front, and the registration on the car in front was ALA. Right in front. ALA.
You were given a reminder. Yes, here it is. Yes, synchronicities are just, Somebody else want to say anything?
Can you just clarify something on the too? Does the Dhikr also include the silent meditation of the heart, or is it only with the mantra?
That's an important. It's an important question. Yes, I think so, Maura. I think it is the same, and in fact, it happened a few months ago that someone in the Sunday meditation asked the same question. She's not here now, and then I had a chance afterwards to ask Mrs. Tweedy, and because this lady said that she feels much. She can go much deeper in the meditation when she uses the Allah mantra, but she wasn't sure whether she's doing the right thing, because she thought that what she had in fact to do was to submerge herself in love and to imagine someone loved, and then I had a chance to ask Mrs. Tweedy, and she said it's one and the same. It's one and the same. There's no difference. And the way I understand it, but this is really how I explain it to myself, I don't know if this is true, is that in the history of this group, there were stages in which the mantra wasn't given overall. It was given maybe to certain people or not, I don't know, but it wasn't given sort of at large. And then the focus of the mind was on someone loved, in order to go through the experience of love that Tweety told us to focus on, to the love of God. But then the mantra was given. At a certain point, the mantra was given, and we are talking about it. And once it was given, I think then it has become one and the same, and shouldn't be any confusion. Yeah. But because there was a confusion, I asked Mrs. Tweedy, and she said it's one and the same. So. See, otherwise, the Sufi tradition in its Arabic and Persian sources don't really have a word for meditation. The word for meditation is dhikr. And the fact that we always knew that we are called the silent Sufis because the meditation is silent, and we read in the records that the Naqshbandis talked about the silent dhikr. So even logically, just from this point of view, it is the same.
But it's all right to do the meditation without consciously trying to say their love.
It's whatever is right for the person.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, if for someone the Allah mantra is not right, then there's no.
During the meditation.
Yes, whatever is right. I mean, it's very, very lenient path in the sense that there's no prescription really. I mean, there's no prescription of how the body has to be, and no prescription of you must do this. You're given a mantra. Do with it what you like, use it. It's a tool. It is a tremendous tool, like Gisela said, from her experience. But
for me, sometimes it gets in the way of meditation.
yeah, well then,
not always,
no,
but
then there's no force. I mean,
sometimes,
yeah,
not in the way.
it's
the wrong
yeah,
but
it's
not always.
yeah. The main thing really is, I think, the way I understand the emphasis of the tradition is to experience more and more the different dimensions, and then everything becomes very relative. We don't hang on so much to our little lives and to our little problems and to our little, we do what we have to do, and we go through life, and we have relationships, and we quarrel, and we are nice to each other, and life is tremendous. It's wonderful. We're not ascetics, we're not monks, and we live. And like somebody said the other day that I can't remember who it was, maybe Gisela, I think it was you, that you once talked to Mrs. Tweety about sexual things, and she said, what's wrong with sexuality? Or, I mean, it's not about flying away from life, but realizing, and I think it can be done only through the meditation. Whether it is with a mantra or without, it's not that important. That there's so much more than the senses know. So much more, and that's what mysticism is about. It's not about but the other thing which I find so inspiring is the aspiration of these people, like the teachers and the Malamatis and Hakim Tirmidhi and people like this, the aspiration to purify, that it becomes very, very clean as possible. And I think scientists or artists who have a vision know what it is about. It doesn't have to be necessarily mystics. but the aspiration to have something very clean. When it's taken into the realm of relationship with the beloved, it's tremendous. And it's not morality, although morality is a consequence of it. Like Tweedy said so many times, that highly evolved people, if they work on themselves in this way, not only in a psychological way, they are highly moral, but not because they impose morality upon themselves, but because they cannot but be clean. Cannot be just one-pointed clean. It's really like great artists, I think, know it. They musicians, it's not only mystics. And it's this, because we hear so many things, like now it's a time, there's new age and people are interested and this and that and the other. It's not like that. There's no bullshit. It's just...
So it's also interesting, I think, when you said that, about this, I think you used the word narcissistic in relation to one can get sort of involved in is one psychologically expressing. But after, it's really actually, again, in this process, when you say that things become very, very pure, these things become very, very,
very, very
secondary.
Yes.
It's kind of like a distraction, you could get lost.
Yes, but then as in everything, discrimination is so important. Like when in our groups we tell dreams, for instance, sometimes it is important to work on the psychological message. Sometimes it's of utter importance, because there's and it also depends on the type, because there are types of people who are, I don't know exactly how to call it. It's not that they are more spiritual than others, but maybe they're more airy, more airy, more sort of, and they have to be grounded sometimes because all sorts of things are going on, experiences, ecstasy, flying up high, and the foundation is not strong. This is just as an example. And sometimes and there have been people who have been producing and sharing a lot of dreams, for instance, where the psychological knots have been so clearly in need to be worked on and shared with. And there are other cases which is just, why do you hang on and on, but who can say exactly? The main thing is, as you said, that with this practice, if it's done sort of like with a clear heart, not more, because we can't do more, then many things become secondary. The perspective changes. It's what Tweedy said all along: nothing changes but our values. We just see things differently. Life remains the same, but we see things differently. And I think it's important to emphasize this, because these multitude of layers, wait a minute, it's not all the history, it's not just what we see. Otherwise, how can we understand really the way the tradition is passed on, like through this tawajjuh, through this facing? Or people have gone to sit with Mother Meera, and I know personally at least one person that has been tremendously touched, but nothing happens. And maybe for other people it's just left no mark, but and this is a person who has been meditating and practicing for many years, but that touched her. So things are happening on other levels of consciousness, and we just better say it, you know, and face it and live it. And not say it glibly, because really there is always this thing of people say so glibly, oh, I was in another state of consciousness. And it's not that. It's something else.
Did you use the word other existences at the same? Did you say it again at the same time? And in what context were you? Was it the word existence you used?
Dimensions of existence. Dimensions of existence. Yes. Yes.
Can you clarify that?
I'm not sure that I can. I'm not sure that I can. I think it's really a question of experience. Like, for instance, if you take this passage from The Tempest of Shakespeare, I'm not sure if I'm right, but I think this is one of his last plays, if not the last. And when you read this passage, you see how this is written from a very deep experience of someone who has lived and seen and have come to understand that all this is but a dream. But behind these dreams, and Prospero is very, very much a person who deals with spirits and powers and things and magic, you know. It's like there's more, and there's more, and there's more. And I think I cannot clarify more than that, except that when we read the wisdom of people like Shakespeare, like Rumi, like Attar, like these Naqshbandi teachers, or when we read Tweedy's book, I don't know if you have, it's like we can sense that this is about other dimensions as well. I think I'd like to emphasize this, as well as this, because life is important.
Other dimensions outside of ourselves, not other dimensions within ourselves.
Oh, within, very much within, very much within, very much within. I think this passage where everything has been sort of implanted in creation. I mean, otherwise, how could we? How could we go beyond what we see or what we hear or what we touch? I mean, it's only because we have been given these organs, which are like little, you know, seeds. They have to be nourished or nurtured in order to blossom. It's simple. But that's the essence of mysticism. It's all mysticism.